Picture this, if you will, a vast frozen landscape, a world locked in ice. The wind howls, a sound that's less like weather and more like a predator hunting. And in this world, we've been sold an image. It's an image of a man. A lone, rugged figure. Muscles coiled, brow heavy, a crude stone tool clenched in his fist. He stands against a mammoth, against a saber-toothed cat, against the elements themselves. He is strong. He is solitary. He is the master of his world. But that image is a fantasy, a dangerous oversimplification, the truth of survival 1,000,000 years ago wasn't a solo mission, it was a team project. The greatest threat to early humans wasn't just the giant beasts they encountered. It was the sheer, overwhelming, relentless pressure of an environment that was utterly indifferent to their existence. A single individual, no matter how strong, how fast, how clever, was just a snack waiting to happen. Or a storm away from freezing, or a twisted ankle away from starving. The real story of our survival isn't written in the strength of a single arm. It's written in the collective strength of the group. It's the story of the first team huddle, in the dark, against the cold of a world that didn't want them. So, let's break down what this team actually did, because this wasn't just about feeling safer together. This was a strategic, practical, and absolutely necessary division of labor. Think about a hunt. A single hunter, even with a spear, is no match for a giant enraged herbivore. But a group, that's a different story. One group could fan out, drive the animal towards a cliff or a trap. Others could lie in wait. The communication, the timing, the trust required, which was a military operation. The reward, thousands of calories of meat, fat and hide that could feed and clothe the entire band for days. A success that was impossible alone, and it wasn't just the hunt, it was the gather. While some hunted, others foraged. And this was never a passive activity. It was a knowledge-intensive process, knowing which plants were nutritious, which were poisonous, where to find water when the fruits would be ripe. This knowledge was collected, shared, and passed down, a living library held by the group. And then, the watch. In a world of predators that hunted at dawn and dusk, having a set of eyes dedicated solely to watching the perimeter, listening for the crack of a branch that wasn't the wind, that was the difference between a peaceful night and a massacre. The group was a multi-tool. It was a weapon, a pantry, a library, and an early warning system, all rolled into one. Now, let's play out the alternative. Let's do the harsh math of solitude. Follow that mythical lone caveman. He manages to bring down a small animal. He eats, but now he must sleep, and in his sleep he is vulnerable. There is no one to watch for the prowling direwolf. There is no one to share the watch, so he sleeps in fits and starts, never truly resting. His energy depletes. He gets injured. A cut from a rock, a thorn in his foot, a minor inconvenience for us, but a death sentence for him. Infection sets in. There is no one to bring him water, to help him forage while he heals. He weakens. He becomes easier prey. His story ends, not with a heroic last stand, but with a whimper, alone in the silence. This is the cold, hard calculus of prehistory. The individual was a fragile node. The group was a network, and a network can withstand the failure of a single node. If a hunter was injured, the band could care for him. If a gatherer became sick, others could feed her children. The group shared the calories, but they also shared the risk. They distributed it. This created a buffer, a safety net that allowed for bad days, for mistakes, for learning. It allowed for resilience. That resilience, that ability to absorb shock and keep going, that is the deepest, most fundamental social secret that kept us alive. It wasn't about being the strongest. It was about being the most connected in that connection. That's where our real story begins. So, we have our group, our band of early humans, huddled together for safety. But a group of individuals isn't a team, not yet. To become a team, they needed to do something extraordinary. They needed to connect their minds. And this didn't start with complex words. It started with a look, a glance. Imagine two hunters, stalking prey, through tall grass. They can't speak. A single sound could spook the herd, but one hunter catches the other's eye. He gives a slight nod to the left. A flick of his eyes indicates a direction. His partner understands. He moves. This is the foundation of it all. Nonverbal communication. It was a language of gesture, of expression, of subtle body language. A tightened grip on a spear could signal tension. A relaxed posture could mean the coast is clear. A shared smile over a successful find that reinforced the bond. This was the original social network, operating in complete silence. It was about building what psychologists call shared attention, the ability to know that you are both looking at the same thing and understanding its importance. This silent understanding was the prerequisite for everything that came next. It was the first operating system for human society, and it ran on a simple, powerful code, a shared look. But as powerful as a look can be, it has its limits. You can't describe the location of a water source with a glance. You can't explain which berry causes a painful death with a gesture. This is where the true magic began. This is where the grunts and calls slowly, over millennia, evolved into something more, language. And with language came humanity's most powerful weapon, the story. Picture the end of a long, hard day. The group is gathered around the one thing that truly set them apart, a controlled fire. It provides warmth, light, and protection, but it also provided the world's first classroom. Here, around the flames, knowledge became immortal. An elder could point to a peculiar rock formation and say, "That is where we found the great bear last season." A mother could tell her children, "The river bends sharply past the old oak tree, and there the water is sweet." They weren't just sharing facts. They were building a map, a collective database. They were downloading survival information directly into the next generation. A story about a hunter who got lost and nearly died taught everyone the importance of landmarks. This was the cloud, the original cloud, not stored on servers but in stories, passed from mouth to ear, around a fire that held the darkness at bay. And with this shared knowledge, this collective intelligence, something revolutionary happened. The group could now afford to have specialists. This is a giant leap. It's the moment a group stops just surviving and starts building a culture. Because not everyone had to be a master hunter anymore. If the group's knowledge was secure, if the food was shared, then someone with a keen eye for detail could spend time experimenting. Maybe they noticed that certain clays, when mixed with water and applied to a wound, seemed to soothe it. Trial and error, over time, created the first healer. Another person with a steady hand and a mind for patterns might take a piece of ochre and draw on a cave wall. They weren't just doodling, they were creating symbols, maps, perhaps rituals to ensure a successful hunt. They were the first artist. Another might have a knack for knapping flint, creating tools that were not just functional, but elegant and efficient. The first engineer. This specialization was a luxury paid for by the collective. It meant that the band's total knowledge and skill set expanded exponentially. The healer's knowledge of plants became everyone's knowledge. The artist's symbols became a shared identity. The strength of the group was no longer just in its combined muscle, but in its combined, and now specialized, minds. But here's the thing about putting a group of intelligent, emotional individuals together. It's messy. Conflict is inevitable. Two hunters both want the same piece of meat. A couple argues. A personality clash causes tension. In a world where cooperation is life, these internal fractures are just as deadly as any external threat. A fight could split the band in two, dooming both halves. So, our ancestors had to invent something new. They had to invent society. We had to create the first rules. This wasn't about written laws. It was about social protocols, unspoken codes of conduct that everyone understood, the concept of fairness, of taking turns, the idea that the food, especially a large kill, was shared according to custom, perhaps the best cuts to the hunters, but portions for everyone, including the elderly who couldn't contribute physically. There would have been mediators, respected elders who could de-escalate a situation, who could remind people of what was at stake, their very survival. Gossip, as negative as it sounds, actually served a purpose. It policed behavior. To be seen as selfish, as a freeloader, meant risking your social standing, and in a world that relied on social currency, that was a powerful deterrent. They learned that to survive the world outside, they first had to master the world inside the tribe. And this leads us to perhaps the most beautiful and defining secret of our survival: compassion. Think about it logically from a purely brutal, Darwinian perspective. An individual who is injured, sick or old is a drain on resources. They can't hunt, they can't gather, they slow the group down. The cold math of nature would suggest leaving them behind. But the fossil record tells a different story. We have skeletons, clear evidence of individuals who lived for years with severe disabilities. A healed broken femur that would have required weeks of immobility and care. Crippling arthritis. These people did not survive despite their conditions. They survived because of their conditions. Because they were cared for, someone brought them water. Someone chewed their food for them. Someone protected them while they healed. This is a monumental leap. It's the recognition that a person's value isn't just in their physical strength. In this very moment, that elder, who couldn't hunt, held the entire map of the territory in her mind. That injured hunter's knowledge of animal behavior was still vital. That child represented the future. Caring for the weak wasn't a weakness, it was the ultimate strength. It sent a powerful message to everyone in the group. No matter what happens to you, we will not abandon you. That security, that profound trust, is what allowed individuals to take risks, to innovate, to truly bond. It is the very bedrock of what we call humanity. So you have the practical cooperation, the shared knowledge, the rules, and the compassion. The final piece, the thing that transformed a band of survivors into a tribe with an identity, was belief. We see it in the caves, the breathtaking paintings of animals, deep in the dark, far from living areas. This wasn't decoration, this was ritual, this was ceremony. These were the first cathedrals, gatherings where stories were told not just as lessons, but as myths, where the group collectively experienced something bigger than themselves. Perhaps it was a ritual to honor the spirit of the animal they had killed, a dance to celebrate a successful hunt, or to plead with the rains to return. These shared beliefs, these collective experiences, created an invisible bond as strong as any blood tie. It said, we are not just a random group of people. We are the people. We share the same world, the same struggles, and the same stories. This shared identity was the glue. In a world of constant, terrifying uncertainty, it provided meaning. It turned the brutal struggle for survival into a shared journey, and that feeling of belonging to something greater than oneself may have been the most vital social secret of all. It is the reason we are here today, not as solitary survivors, but as a global family, still connected by the invisible bonds our ancestors forged so long ago. So close your eyes, relax your breath, and fall asleep to the entire story of a civilization few remember but none should forget. The Thracians were not one tribe, but many, dozens of warrior clans, scattered across what is now Bulgaria, Romania, northern Greece, and European Turkey. They lived in the forests, in the valleys, and in fortified hilltop settlements. To the Greeks they were wild and fierce. To the Persians, they were worthy enemies. To the Romans, they were both threats and legends. And yet, for all their might, the Thracians never built an empire. They lived in fragmented kingdoms and chieftaincies bound by culture, but not by rule. What was daily life like in ancient Thrace? Picture this: wooden homes surrounded by wheat fields, goats and sheep bleating gently in the hills, men and women wearing colorful tunics, silver jewelry and tattoos. Yes, the Thracians were heavily tattooed, often with symbols of gods, birds, and nature. They were farmers, but also fierce warriors. They drank from golden cups, played haunting music on flutes and lyres, and believed deeply in the afterlife. Their tombs rich with treasure. Horses and weapons were built like homes for the dead. The Thracians had their own powerful beliefs. One of their most sacred gods was Sabazios, a sky deity associated with thunder and the sun. Some worshipped Bendis, a moon goddess later adopted into Greek religion. But above all, they believed in immortality of the soul. To a Thracian warrior, death was not the end, it was a passage. They sang songs at funerals, not in sorrow, but in celebration. Their tombs, many still standing today, were painted with murals of banquets, chariots, and scenes of joy, because the afterlife, they believed, was a continuation of life, not a departure from it. Thrace sat between powerful civilizations: the Greeks to the south, the Scythians to the east, the Celts to the west, and the Persians far beyond. Each of these powers tried to conquer or influence the Thracians. The Persian king Darius I invaded in 513 BCE. Alexander the Great passed through Thrace on his way to Asia. The Greeks traded but also colonized the coasts, and the Romans, they eventually absorbed Thrace into their empire. But the Thracians never gave in easily. They fought fiercely and bravely, often on horseback, armed with curved swords, spears, and passion. Though fragmented for much of their history, the Thracians did form powerful kingdoms. The greatest of these was the Odrysian kingdom, formed in the 5th century BCE, under kings like Satis III. Thrace became a regional power, rich from trade, feared for its cavalry, and admired for its goldwork. Thracian craftsmen were world-class. They made intricate masks, armor, and drinking vessels, all of which have been found buried in tombs, still gleaming after thousands of years. Their artistry tells a story that words never could, a story of elegance and brutality, of life lived in color, even in times of war. By the 1st century BCE, Rome's shadow loomed large. The Thracians fought often as allies, sometimes as rebels. One of the most famous Thracians in history wasn't a king, but a gladiator. Spartacus, a former Thracian soldier enslaved by Rome, would lead the greatest slave rebellion the empire ever saw. Though his uprising would eventually fall, Spartacus became a symbol of resistance, of courage, and of Thracian pride. Eventually Rome conquered all of Thrace. By 46 CE, it became a Roman province. Temples were torn down, new cities were built, the old gods forgotten, but the Thracian spirit never quite disappeared. Over the centuries the Thracians faded into history. Their language was lost, their names erased from records, their beliefs buried beneath Christian churches and Roman ruins, but they never fully vanished. Their blood mixed with Greeks, Slavs, Bulgars, and others who came after. Their tombs remained silent hills scattered across Bulgaria and beyond. Inside, chariots, murals, crowns, and whispers from a forgotten time. Why should we remember the Thracians? Because history isn't just about empires and emperors. It's about the people who stood between giants, the ones who lived boldly, loved deeply, and left behind more than just ruins. The Thracians were poets and fighters. They worshipped stars and sang to the dead. They carved beauty into gold and courage into stone. And though they did not write their own history, their legacy survives in every artifact, every burial mound, every forgotten melody played long ago on a wooden flute. So now, as you lie still and let your thoughts wander, imagine a Thracian warrior, standing on a hill, wrapped in a woolen cloak, his hair braided, his sword at his side. He watches the horizon, where foreign armies approach, but he does not flinch because his people are proud. His gods are with him, and even if history forgets his name, the earth will remember his steps. Sleep well, traveler. You've journeyed through a land of mystery and strength. And as you drift into dreams, the story of the Thracians hums gently in the silence. Good night. Imagine stepping outside your house, but there's no house, no roads, no power lines, no cell signal. Just blinding white snow stretching for miles. Now imagine that snow never melts. The air stings your lungs. Every breath feels like you're inhaling razors. Congratulations, you've just been dropped into the Ice Age. We're talking about the Pleistocene epoch, a time period that began over 2.5 million years ago and lasted until about 12,000 years ago. For humans, this was a time of unimaginable struggle. Temperatures in some regions dropped to -40 degrees Fahrenheit. Glaciers covered entire continents. But here's the worst part. You don't have clothes. You don't have fire. You don't even have food. This isn't a survival challenge. It's a death sentence. You might think you've experienced cold before, maybe walking through a snowstorm, or losing power during a winter blackout. But that's nothing compared to the constant, bone-deep freeze of the Ice Age. Forget about shivering for an hour and then hopping into a heated room. In the Ice Age, your body never truly warms up. Your skin cracks, your lips bleed, fingers go numb, then black, and if you sit still too long, even for a nap, hypothermia quietly sets in. There were no second chances. And while you're trying to figure out how to not freeze to death, something else is watching you from the trees. In the Ice Age, humans weren't apex predators. They were prey. Lions bigger than today's African lions. Packs of dire wolves that worked together like professional assassins. Saber-toothed cats with fangs longer than your fingers. And don't forget, short-faced bears standing 12 feet tall and running faster than a racehorse. Every sound in the forest could be something that wants to eat you. And you're slow, soft, and smell like fear. Imagine being asleep at night, in a shelter made of sticks and animal skins. You hear breathing, not your own, just outside. No doors, no locks. If something wants in, it's coming in. Still think you'd survive, even if you somehow avoid becoming a predator's dinner. You still have a bigger problem. Hunger. Where do you find food in the Ice Age? There are no supermarkets, no kitchens, just frozen terrain. Most edible plants are buried under snow. Fruits, forget it, they're seasonal luxuries. So you need meat. But hunting isn't a weekend hobby here. It's life or death. Every single day. To get food, you'd have to kill a wild animal with tools you don't even know how to make yet. Then skin it, butcher it, cook it. And that's if you even make it close enough without being gored to death by a mammoth or stomped by an angry bison. And if you do get the meat, now you smell like blood and everything in the forest knows it. If a modern human like you dropped into the Ice Age, you'd last hours, maybe a day. But our ancestors, they made it their home, so how did they do it? Here's where it gets fascinating. The first rule of Ice Age survival: find shelter fast. Prehistoric humans didn't just stumble around hoping for caves. They built shelters from bones, wood, animal hides, and even ice blocks in some regions. Mammoth bones were especially prized, not just for tools, but for making domes that acted like ancient igloos. Covered in thick hides, layered with moss or snow, these shelters were warm enough to keep a fire burning and a small group alive. Think about that while you're complaining about Wi-Fi. A group of ancient humans were surviving a blizzard. Under a mammoth ribcage, they didn't have tutorials, no architects, just instinct, trial and error. And the burning will to live. Fire was everything. Not just for warmth, but for cooking, protection, even social bonding. Sitting around the fire wasn't just cozy, it was critical. They guarded fire like treasure. If the flames went out in the middle of the night, there was no flicking a lighter, they had to start over. Sometimes by striking flint or spinning wood with dry fibers for hours. There's evidence that some tribes even carried fire from one place to another in glowing coals wrapped in moss. Imagine trekking through a snowstorm, holding a smoldering ember in your cloak, praying the wind doesn't snuff out your only hope. Around that fire, they shared food, passed knowledge, and told stories, maybe even the first bedtime tales of monsters and gods. Forget smartphones. Prehistoric survival depended on something far simpler: stone and bone. Their tools were shockingly advanced. Flint knives so sharp they rival modern scalpels. Spear tips carved from antlers, weighted clubs, needles made from bones to stitch clothing. They weren't just brutes. With rocks, these people engineered gear that worked in the harshest climate on Earth, and they did it with no written language, no factories, and no blueprints. And don't forget weapons. If you wanted meat, you had to hunt it, and that meant facing 10-foot-tall woolly beasts with nothing but teamwork and handmade spears. Think of the nerves, the precision, the sheer courage. No pause button, no backup plan. Imagine walking barefoot across snow, starving, freezing, dragging a stick you hope will scare off a saber-tooth. That's not a movie scene. That was life. Modern humans, we're soft. Put one of us in Ice Age conditions, and things start breaking down fast. Frostbite in under 30 minutes. Hypothermia in 2 hours. Your blood thickens, your fingers stiffen, your thinking slows. Eventually your organs shut down, quietly, painfully. But early humans, their bodies adapted. Over generations they evolved shorter limbs, broader noses, stockier builds, all optimized to conserve heat. They developed thick calluses, denser hair, and even unique fat storage that worked like insulation. You'd be crying for thermal socks. They were trudging through snow and reindeer hides, chasing mammoths with ice on their beards. The Ice Age built us, and it broke the weak. But survival wasn't just physical. The cold messes with your brain. It makes you tired, slow, hopeless. The line between rational thought and panic becomes razor thin. Imagine a mother losing her child to frostbite and still having to hunt that night, or a father sitting by a fire watching his tribe starve one by one, knowing there's no food left. These weren't just survivors, they were warriors of the soul. To keep going in that world, you needed more than muscle, you needed mental fire, a deep ancestral grit no modern self-help book could ever teach. And yet, they did it. Not just for a night, for thousands of years. Here's the wildest part. The Ice Age didn't just shape our bodies, it may have shaped our minds. Many scientists believe the harsh conditions accelerated human intelligence. The constant struggle to find food, build shelter, navigate threats, it forced us to invent, cooperate, and think ahead. Language may have developed faster in the cold, because talking meant surviving. So did culture, art, rituals, even empathy. So while it nearly killed us, it also made us. You wouldn't survive 24 hours in the Ice Age, but without the Ice Age, you wouldn't exist at all.